Hello everyone and welcome to the Vash tutorial series. Vash is a web-based animation suite that runs entirely in your browser and is capable of producing output videos complete with audio at any resolution. My name is Clayton and I am the creator of Vash. I also created the social animation site Drawn, I compose music sometimes, and I am the author of the science fiction novel Holocene. In this video, I'm going to talk about composite shapes, which were one of the first features developed in Vash for animating. They are extremely powerful but very simple tools to use, and I hope you'll be able to create really neat animations with them by the end of this tutorial. The topics in this tutorial rely heavily on the preceding tutorials, namely the basic introduction to Vash and the layers tutorial. If you haven't watched them yet, you might want to check them out before continuing. On with the video. To start, I'd like to talk about the arrow tool, which really hasn't been mentioned yet. Unlike other programs, you can't use the arrow tool to select items on the stage. In order to select an item on the stage, you have to click on it in the timeline. What the arrow tool does in Vash is it allows you to move the selected item around, or in the case of objects that have additional grip information, it allows you to take their grips and modify them. New to this version of Vash is the default style bar, which appears underneath the toolbar. This provides the fill style for any new objects, the stroke style for any new objects, and the width of the stroke for any new objects that are created, whether they're composite objects, paths, or text. When you create a new object, whatever that style is selected is set there. If you go and change this style after the fact, it will not apply to the existing object. If you want to change that object's properties, you'll have to click and find its path style component and change it there. When you have a particular object selected in the timeline, you can shift and click on either the fill or the stroke or the W for the line width to copy those current values. So if I were to change this to a stroke of 33, I can shift and click on the W, and that will basically act like an eyedropper tool and select that value. Likewise with stroke, if I decided it needed to be like a green stroke, I could now click on stroke and now that's green. And now if I go and I create a new shape, it has all those same properties. The first composite shape tool I want to talk about is the rectangle tool. It's the most basic composite shape. It is simply a rectangle with width and height properties. I'll stretch this out a bit better, that you can adjust here, or with the arrow tool using the sizing grips. Because the width and the height are keyframeable, you can see that you can, if I turn on record here, make adjustments. Whoops, need to move it. Sometimes these grips get a little weird, so sorry about that. I'll have to fix them in the future. Yeah, it looks like there's a bug there. But width and height are keyframeable, so you can adjust the shape's width and height. The next shape is the polygon composite shape. This is called a polygon, even though it initially looks like a circle, because I imagine that most animators want to work with circles than other shapes by default. But in reality, the polygon is a closed figure of an equal number of sides. In this case, it defaults to 100, which makes it look like a circle. But if you take it down to the minimum, which is 3, you end up with a triangle. 4 will give you a diamond, 5 will give you a pentagon, 6 hexagon, septagon, octagon, and etc., into numbers that I don't know the Greek names for, up to a maximum of 200 sides. You can see even when you zoom in, it still looks pretty circular. If you bring it down, you'll start to see those edges appear. Like everything else, that is keyframeable, so you can do strange things like keyframe it at 4 sides here and then keyframe it at, I don't know, 16 sides, and then keyframe it again at 3 sides, and then when you play it, you just kind of get this strange effect. Just kind of neat. The final composite shape is the Polyshape tool. This tool allows you to create arbitrarily closed figures. And unlike other tools where you imagine you trace the path. As soon as you start putting a few points, where you click adds a point between the two closest points. So you can click and drag and make interesting shapes that way. Presently, you cannot click and drag the dots, the grips for the points using the Polyshape tool. You'll have to switch back to the arrow tool for right now to do that. I may change that in the future because it would be a little more intuitive to be able to change that using just the Polyshape tool. So polyshapes are made up of individual points. You can select those points. You can keyframe their positions. So I can move it, and then over here, move it. Oh, the grips don't move. That's another bug. But you can animate individual parts of your polyshape, which again is pretty cool. One thing I haven't really talked about yet is the pivot setting in your transform. This is the point relative to the local or to the shape's parent that the object rotates around. When you first create a polyshape, the pivot point is set at the first point, and that's that little circle with the plus in it right here. If I were to rotate this object right now, it would rotate around that point. That's the point of rotation. It's also the point it scales around. So if I scale it, it's going to scale like that. I can use the arrow tool to grab the pivot point and put it somewhere else. And then when I rotate, it rotates around that. Or if I scale, it scales about that point. Because the child shapes inside a composite shape also have their own transforms, they also have their own pivots. And again, the pivot is set to the location of the first square. I don't know if you can see it faintly there. It can be difficult to grab that to move it around. So one of the useful tools we have here is align the pivot to the center of the shape. So it finds the rough center of the shape and puts it there. Another useful tool is as you click these shapes around, the very first point is at 0, 0, which isn't always useful if you want to keep your shapes centered at the origin. So this will realign all the points to their local origin, minus this one, which is keyframed right now. It did get realigned, but because it's keyframed, it's showing off as skewed. And then you can realign your pivot to the center of the shape. The last two buttons here are for flipping the points around the pivot. So you can flip them vertically or you can flip them horizontally. Minus, of course, the one that we keyframed because it's got values stuck over there. Oh, and that does weird things. Cool. More bugs. Love showing you bugs. That always makes for a great training video. The reason why these three tools are in blue and all have the name Composite Shape in front of them when you hover over them is that they can be merged together to create more complex shapes. So if I start with a simple rectangle here, you'll see that there's a subtree where I show the actual composite shape itself, the one that you see here in the timeline, and underneath it is rectangle 1. Now, if I were to select the composite shape and I'd start drawing another rectangle, I get rectangle 2, and now I have a T shape because they merge together. And I can merge in any of the composite shapes. So if I wanted a circle up here at the top, I could, and it's rounded. Or if I wanted to do something really neat with a poly shape, I could. Grab the points and loop them around and do interesting things. And then there you have it. That's my very interesting shape. And because, as I said, everything is animatable, you can animate every single point, every single property, and you can have the shapes do something interesting. So for example, suppose I take my polygon here and I want to animate that it slides down. I can do that. And if I play, you'll see it slides down. Now you noticed that the poly shape came along with the polygon. This is because the poly shape is a child of the polygon. And as I introduced in the layers video, children get moved along with their parents. And I'll show you later how this becomes a very powerful tool for animating with ease within Vash. What allows you to create really complex and interesting shapes with the Composite Shape tool is the fact that every composite shape has a merge operation on it, which explains how the pieces are supposed to merge together. By default, that operation is union, which means they all combine together to form one big blob with a shared fill and stroke. So I'm just going to move the Polyshape out from the, I'll just delete it altogether. Go away, Polyshape. So if I were to change this operation from union to intersect, this would now be only where the rest of the shape intersects with polygon 1. If I change it to difference, it's basically cutting the poly shape out. And because this is still animated, you can see what kind of effect that has on the shape. And this is the shape changing all the time. XOR means basically everywhere where they don't cross each other. So it cuts out the part of the sphere that is covering the other rectangles, but otherwise draws the bit that isn't covered by rectangles. And you can see kind of what happens as you animate this. When the circle is completely inside, you can't see any of it, but you can see the bits that are outside of it as you scroll down. And we also have the option of none, which simply means to not render that particular composite shape. Why would you want to do this? There may be some instances where you have something that you simply want to not render. The operation is keyframeable, like everything else, so you can have it switch modes as the animation progresses. Now, in case you didn't notice, a composite shape does not necessarily have to consist of objects that touch each other. So this composite shape has 3 pieces that don't actually touch each other. But if I were to animate this piece, let's say the Polyshape 1 here, so that by the end of the animation it's over here, you will see that it actually merges with the other pieces as it moves. Again, this allows you to make interesting things. So let's make something interesting. All right, here's a little face that I've drawn. Keep in mind, I am not an artist, so I know other people out there could do much better faces, but here's my happy little guy. I would like him to have some sunglasses and be cool. So I'm going to go down to the eyes layer here, and I am going to create a new layer. I'm going to name it sunglasses because I love naming my layers. Makes it easier to track and keep track of things. And I'm going to take a black color, but I'm going to dial down the opacity so that you can still see their eyes behind it. So I'm going to go and create one lens. I see that my default style had a stroke of 0, so let's add some stroke to that. I'm actually going to move this over here at x equals 0, and you'll see why. Because I'm going to take the polygon, I'm going to move it this way. And then I'm going to move it down a little bit. I'm going to take the handy dandy copy button to make a copy, and I could drag it across, but because I've centered it around 0, all I have to do is flip the sign to make a duplicate the other way. Now I didn't make my eyes very good because I rushed them. So I've got 2 lenses, and if we want the little nose bridge, zoom in here so we can see better. I'll just create a little rectangle. And there, now they merge together. But, you know, this might be a little boring. They're just circular glasses. I could also add rectangles or poly shapes, I guess, for, here, let's make poly shape for the edges. Oops, I screwed up my rectangle. And I'll create another, where'd my poly shape go? I'll copy you. And then I will flip you that way, and then drag you across over here. All right, so I got some glasses right now. They're kind of boring though, so let's make them cooler. I'm going to take another rectangle right here. Oops, no, I don't want it there. And I'm going to move it like this, but I'm going to move you up. Vash draws from the bottom up. The bottommost operation by default is a union. So if you want to do any different operations, you need to, you need to move your things higher, and you need to move them above the layers that you want them to have an effect on. So now I can take that rectangle and move it down just a little bit. And now I've got like super cool guy glasses that are flat on top and round on the bottom. And because my sunglasses all have the one composite shape, I can give these a bit of a blue tinge to them. There. How cool is that? And I just took me a couple minutes to make this, and now my character has super cool sunglasses. As you've already seen in this video, you can animate the subshapes of a composite shape. But where that gets really powerful is when you arrange the subshapes deliberately. So I'm going to make a little rectangle here. I am going to make a duplicate of it. I'm going to make it a child of that rectangle, and I'm going to slide it, whoops, that was height. I'm going to slide it down to about there. Now its pivot point is here at 0, 0 locally. This is 124 high, so half of 124 is what, 62? I want to go negative 62 to go up, down. So now my pivot point is there. If I rotate it, see it move. And a neat trick that I figured out, which doesn't look too bad, is to take a small circle, put it there. And now if I rotate this guy, let's adjust just. I notice there's some flickering here as I animate. I will fix that in the future. I have a fairly good idea what's causing that. So now I think you can see what I'm kind of getting at here. This polygon is actually an elbow. This rectangle is an upper arm. This rectangle is the forearm. And just for fun, I'll put a polygon at the end here. That is the hand, and if I change its sides to like 5, it kind of looks like a fist. So the neat thing about this is if I take my upper arm and I move its pivot up to minus 62, now when I rotate it, oops, elbow needs to be a child of that. I'll fix that. Sorry. Make sure the elbow is a child of upper arm. Now, when I rotate upper arm, everything comes for the ride. If I rotate forearm, it looks like mostly the circle that acts as the elbow kind of hides the bend a bit. And you can even go so far as, if I call this hand, you can go so far as to move the hand a little bit too. This is a very simple hand, but I can take this entire composite shape and I can move it around. So let's just say I called this one left arm. And let's create a couple layers here. I'm going to drop down. View to the bottom. Let's say I go and create, what's a nice color here? I like green. I'm going to create this. I'm going to call it body. And then I'm going to copy my left arm, paste it over here, and then I'm going to drag it over and actually move this layer up to the top so it can be my right arm. And because these are independent objects, I can move them independently, rotate them independently. Set that back to 0, that back to 0. So now you can see that if I stretch each of these out and just do it quickly using the timeline button here to stretch them out to match their neighbors, you can see now that we can keyframe individual pieces and actually get individual movement of every part. And I can, on the left hand, go down to the hand and, do some rotation there. And when I play, you'll see you've got all the pieces moving. Now, you can start to see that you could make legs and a walking pattern and everything. So these are extremely useful and powerful techniques to do very quick animating. Like you just saw me make this here in a couple minutes. I've already got like arms I can pose and things. And you're like, oh, well, that right arm looks terrible. Well, you just put a layer on top of that and you basically cheat and are like, look at that, there's a sleeve. And even if you move this down and make it a child of the right arm, and then, oops, and then put it back where you wanted it to be. And then I believe if I rotate my arm all together, oops, except now I need to take my right arm and move my pivot up here. Now I've got a sleeve for my character. And it looks half decent. I mean, yeah, you're not Studio Ghibli, but you can make some pretty cool animations that look half decent very quickly, very easily with these techniques. Now, one drawback to this type of animating is that even if I were to say, here, let's create a child layer, another child layer of my right arm, and I'm going to make, let's just say it's a pipe. And I want my character to be holding this pipe in his hand. So even though it's a child of the right arm, so I can take the entire composite shape, rotate it, and the pipe comes along for the ride. But where it falls apart is if I decide, oh, well, I actually want to rotate the forearm now. Oh, that moves independent of the pipe, which really sucks. Well, I have a solution for that. If we go to the pipe, which I should name pipe and name sleeve just so that things are clear. Transforms of children of composite shapes give you an additional property to say what you actually want to parent to from that composite shape. So here I can say I want to parent to the hand. And of course, then it immediately gets off-centered. So I just move it back to where it needs to be. And now when I want to rotate my forearm, the pipe comes along for the ride. Even if I decide to rotate my hand or do something with my hand, now I can have attached objects to the hand. This is also incredibly useful if you want to create something like animal arms. So I'm going to take the same sort of thing. I'm going to create a upper arm. I'm going to throw you down there, create a forearm. And I'm going to slide you that way. I am going to select it for arm and create an elbow because I love circular elbows. And I'm going to go to the forearm and I'm going to create this circular hand. That's not a very interesting animal hand. Arm. So let's go ahead and make a child. I'm going to take a darker brown color. I'm going to zoom in a bit because it makes it easier to see. And I am going to dial this down to, let's say, 4. Create. Look. Oh, that's lovely. Wait. Should always just copy and paste. Duplicate. Actually, I'm going to move these out, and you'll see why, because I want to take that polygon 1 and I want to scale it a little bit without stretching the others, just to make them interesting. Once again, reminder, I am not an artist, so forgive me if I'm like not doing anything all that great. And again, we set our pivot points. I want my composite shapes pivot point to be here. I want the forearm to be here by the elbow, which I didn't name, so I'll just do that. Elbow. I'll set your pivot to there. Forearm, your pivot's there. All right, so right now I've got the same sort of deal. I got these nice pads. And if I select my forearm and I want to rotate it, right now the pads don't come along for the ride. But if I change point to paw and recenter it on the paw, now when I go to my forearm and I rotate it, now you've got extra decorations, accoutrements, visual things here. And this works for everything, by the way. So I've copied a popular meme into my clipboard, and I am Control-Ving on the timeline and pasting it in. And, oh, look, it's the aliens guy. So let me just scale him down to maybe 1/4 of the size. Oh, heck, he needs to be even smaller. 1/10 of the size. Oop. Set him over there. I'm going to set him to be on the paw as well. There's some weirdness there I'll have to fix. But again, now I've got an image that the paw is holding. I can take the forearm and I can wave my aliens meme around all I want. Here it is up close. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and I look forward to seeing what amazing things you create with it. Please subscribe and hit that notification button so you know when I put new videos out. If you do create your own videos using Vash, please send me the link so I can see what amazing things people create with my tools. Thanks for watching.